Welcome back to the Trending Communicator. I'm your host, Dan Nestle. Now, I was at a conference last week about AI, of course, and one of the sessions was a panel discussion about AI adoption in organizations. Now, that's kind of my bread and butter these days, so I wanted to get some new information, something I could sink my teeth into. And it was useful to hear what some companies are up to, but the key insight I took away wasn't really about process or training or compliance. I asked the panel if they saw the potential of AI, and more specifically, the way AI can expand and enhance the comms remit to raise the profile of the comms team within the organization. And one of the panelists, a senior comms exec from Mars, the company, not the planet, rightly reframed the question through his answer. He said that it's not our job to get recognition or to boost our own internal brand. It's our job to advise and to counsel and to build trust and credibility within the organization and raise the profile of the company, not our team. So it wasn't really an AI answer, which was great, but it was a great reminder of our purpose. He was thinking of stakeholders, of service. He was really talking about influence. And I mention this because our ability to influence others by properly doing our job, of course, but also by building relationships and being honest brokers is always a hot topic in the industry. We can't lose sight of doing it right, regardless of AI or any other changes we're coping with. It might be one of those things that's AI immune, in fact, moving into the future. Look, I still contend that AI presents a huge opportunity for us to be better advisors, expand our remit, consequently wield influence. But I think my guest today can shed far more light on the topic than I can. A marketing and PR strategist, speaker, podcaster, teacher, and author and trainer. She's done more than most to influence the communications profession. The author of 7 books, including Answers for Ethical Marketers, Answers for Modern Communicators, Putting the Public Back in Public Relations, PR 2.0, and more. She's the CEO of strategic communications firm Pure Performance and co-host of the weekly LinkedIn Live DM show. No stranger to technology, she's developed and delivered training courses on leadership and influence online, and recently developed an AI tool to identify emotions based on facial analysis. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. She is a trending communicator, an influential communicator, as it were. Please welcome to the show, for the second time, actually, when you think about it, Deirdre Breakenridge.
Thank you, Dan. I'm doing well. It's great to be back.
I know, it's great to be back. I was just, before we hit the button, I was reminiscing a little bit with Deirdre about the last time she was on, which was episode 30 or 31 of the original Dan Nestle show. Lots changed since then. I believe we were stuck inside and masking at the time. It's a very different world. And, back then, Deirdre was working on, or kind of putting out there in the marketplace, the FEEL model. And some of you might remember FEEL. And, I'm going to go back to my notes here. Was face your fears, engage with empathy, live with ethics, unleash the love. FEEL, that framework for communication, with interpersonal communications, empathy, and so on. That was 4 years ago. Now it still holds true. I think all of those things are important to keep centered in ourselves as we communicate with others and as we kind of think about how we're structuring our comms and our marketing. But clearly, Deirdre has been up to a few things in the last couple of years. So I want to, first of all, Deirdre, thanks for coming. And second of all, fill in the gap. What you been up to? What's happening? How are we still feeling the feels? How are we?
Well, thank you for asking, first off. Yes, I think we're still feeling the feels. You can't have a relationship if you don't feel.
Right.
If you're in PR and communication, the relationship is everything. How do you advance conversations, communication? And I think to fill in the gaps, I would say that my FEEL model advanced into something that I call the influential communicator, where FEEL is a part of that, but it really means your ability to tune in, to align vocally, verbally, non-verbally, so that you can connect better with somebody else. So I've been doing this model. And I've been doing the speaker coaching around it, the training, lots of podcasting. I have my LinkedIn live show and all the points that you hit, Dan. And it's been great.
It's amazing. I mean, listeners can't see, of course, but if you did, you would notice that Deirdre is ebullient when she's talking about these things. I mean, and it's not often I drop that word. Maybe that's the first time, but I really think that that the evolution of that model and of kind of getting into what drives those relationships with one another, maybe that wouldn't have happened in such a way if it weren't for that kind of 2 years of darkness that we're really not going to mention here. But we've been through a lot as a society. We've been through a lot as communicators and as marketers. And, we've come out the other end now facing AI and facing all these other challenges. But I think the core of our humanity is really what Deirdre's kind of all about here, and how that leads up to influence, right? And once, I love the fact that you're in the training space, in the presentations, and in the learning space, natural kind of progression from communications into there. And also, you're contributing back to the profession and helping communicators all the time. So, how are you finding this kind of, this evolution of, leadership and influence, let's say, in the profession? And, this could be a very long discussion, but how are you finding it in the profession and in the face of the challenges we've been facing? I suppose I used space twice, but there you go. Yeah.
So in some cases it's quicker, and in some it's slower. I find that communicators, as much as we are educators and learners, we're passionate. We, of course, have our soft skills and our hard skills, and we have our ethics that we live by. We often don't flow into some of the trending areas that we really need to wrap our arms around, which you mentioned now is AI. Years ago, when I was writing several of my books, it was social media. And I could say the same thing. Why didn't the PR industry, communications, take the lead on it?
Ooh.
Right? And now here we are. There's AI. We're faced with all these changes. Why don't we take the lead? And if you have the answer, Dan, I want to hear it.
Well, it's been a topic of some discussion. I mean, as I kind of alluded to in the intro there, like the question of how the comms team or comms leader or the CCO, or even if it's, if you're an agency dealing with your clients, how do you raise your profile? And I agree with the executive that that's probably not the right way to phrase the question. It's more about how can we lead in the areas that we know we should be leading, and not from a point of view of like empire building or kind of territory grabs. It's more about what's good for our clients and what's good for the organization, as we see it. Clearly, you don't want to be like dictatorial and say, I know what's best for you and I'm going to just do this, which is the clearest and best way to destroy influence. But how can we be more influential? Because that's really what it comes down to. If we had the influence, and if we were, I don't know, maybe there's an inferiority complex in the comms industry. I'm not sure. But, why do we stay in our own box? Why don't we have the influence that would allow us or kind of encourage us to be the tip of the spear for things like AI? And look, I know we've said this before in the show, but why should a communications team or a communications function, and let's bring marketing into it too, because marketers share the same skill sets in a lot of ways. Why shouldn't we take this revolutionary, we'll call it a technology, but I think it's beyond that. But this whole revolutionary thing, which is built for conversation, which works better when you can do a narrative on the fly, which is like super powered when you understand critical thinking and I like to say interrogation, iteration. These are the things that we do. If you can string a sentence together very, very nicely, like in other words, if you have great writing skills, you're already a leg up from just about anybody else in terms of working with this technology, which functions on language, on natural language. So all the, if you check all the boxes, we should be ahead, but yet, it seems like it's just a software tool that's being implemented by IT or by the CIO or, some other team in an organization has paid the contracts or signed the contracts. So therefore they're taking care of the training. They're taking care of, all the implementation. And I think it's a much bigger picture. And I think organizations are missing this big opportunity to connect dots outside of where their currently thinking is. It's a broaddening effect. It's an additive effect. I'm rambling far too much. This is
you're hitting
but
key points.
Yeah, I think the key there is influence, right? How do we develop that?
Well, if you want to have influence, then you can't see the opportunity with AI as someone else's job. And that is something just based on what you said, and sometimes what I see working with different companies, it is someone else's job, but it's no different than maybe what we were saying back in the day with social media. Well, maybe that's somebody else's job. I guess the heart of it is asking enough leaders, is this a mindset issue? Is this or are we just thinking status quo? Is it a learning curve that we just don't know how to get over some kind of a hump and we're not becoming tech testers to really see what we need to know and where we need to learn and teach our teams? Is this by industry? Is this because some of those regulated industries, it's a lot harder and they're more cautious? There's questions that need to be answered.
I think something you're saying just made me think that there's, to break down how we exert influence within the organization, because it does come down to, recognizing that this isn't necessarily, somebody's particular job, but we know that we have the requisite skills to really make it work wonders. And, we absolutely need to partner with others to get the most out of, and whether it's AI or anything else, but to get the most out of a particular program project. I mean, I can get financial information and do financial analysis with AI, but I still want to sit down with the finance team and discuss everything with them and get a good grip of what the heck I'm looking at, right? And then they would see that I'm coming in with from a position of partnership and desire to learn, but there's these two sides to it. There's from the communicator or the marketer standpoint, and then there's from the executives and leadership and the other functional standpoint. And the influence and building influence has to come both ways. So I want to hear what you've got to say about how we would go about creating those relationships, building the influence. First, maybe it's a good idea to circle back a little bit and in your words, in your mind, how would we define influence broadly? Like, let's start there. Mm-hmm. What is influence? And then how can we build it for ourselves and for our teams?
I think the influence is your ability to move someone in the direction that you desire, an action that you'd like them to take, a way that they're going to participate with you. It could be part persuasion. There's a lot to unpack with influence. And I think Robert Cialdini is probably one of the greatest social psychologists. The book Influence, everybody should check out. But within there, I think you have to take a look at yourself and some of the skills. And I do believe that you can improve your influence. Some is nature and some is nurture. So if you do want to improve your communication skills, then you'll have greater influence. Emotional intelligence plays a part of it. Your authenticity. I also think your contribution score when you're speaking, how much value do you add? Because Dan, what you were talking about, partnering, looking at from the marketer perspective versus the executive perspective, it's the seat at the table. Mm-hmm. And when you work on your skills, you can get that seat at the table because you believe you can be there and the executives want you there.
that part about the executives wanting us there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've seen both sides of that equation.
Oh, yes.
And mea culpa. I've fallen trapped to this whole idea of being over deferential and just kind of staying in my box sometimes. And then I've gone the complete opposite way, which is I get super excited about a new technology or new something. I'm like, we got to do this. We got to do this. What's wrong with you people? Why aren't we doing this? And I know that
case. That's also
the business case.
It's the business case. Bringing that to the table first before we open our mouths too quickly to say, oh, you got to do this. You got to try this. Oh, it's really cool.
Yeah. Speaking from a position of knowledge, right. And evidence. And it's a slower roll, right? You're so tempted. And I admire people or maybe don't even understand people who are able to just have a thought and just keep it in their head. Because that's not me.
Sometimes it's so much better. You have a thought that turns into an idea. If you let that half-baked idea out too soon, it will not come to fruition. I mean, I didn't tell anybody that my team and I were developing an AI facial analysis tool, because maybe if I had shared it early on, people would have said, what are you, crazy? I mean, this is a tool that evaluates your face 98 different ways for emotions.
Woo! Going to get into that for sure.
Yeah.
That would be extremely handy in any number of situations. But, get back to the idea of, of being in the right mindset to be influential or to build influence. I mean, it's a relationship building exercise.
Mm-hmm. And it's confidence too.
Confidence. That's a tough one.
Right. You're not going to influence many people if you don't have confidence in who you are, what you're doing. You have to be fully present, aligned, and believing. Yeah.
It's so critical, and we don't pay much attention to it, right? We develop programs. We either, we have to reach X stakeholders and okay, well, let's find out the best way to reach those stakeholders. And we're always thinking about how to influence them.
Right.
We're always thinking about how to influence them. And in the past, it was a very one-way discussion, or it wasn't even a discussion. It was a very one-way channel. Now it's a conversation with our stakeholders. So, we would do well to understand the principles of influence before, engaging with any of our audiences, and then now, of course, with the interconnectedness inside of an organization or with your clients, we have to influence everyone. And there's a huge discomfort with that. With the idea of influence, I think some people think that influence equals like sales and persuasion. When you think about persuasion, it's like, oh, well, that's for the salespeople to do. Or, I stayed away from sales. I don't want to put my opinion on anybody else. I don't feel good about that. But that's really not giving any credence or any credit to the idea of influence as a core skill that communicators need to have.
Yes.
But it's a struggle for me, and I think it's a struggle for a lot of folks. And when we think about the future, I think influence is going to become even more and more powerful, or more and more important. So let's going back to my question about or my point about there being two sides to this whole influence equation. Right? If you could just pinpoint the key things, the top factors that you need to be influential from from the person who's seeking to be influential point of view, us, I suppose. And then what, how that's received on the other side. What is what can we expect, and how can we tell? How can we understand whether the other people or the other person is buying what we're selling?
Right. Well, I touched on it before. It's emotional intelligence. You spoke of the relationship of influence. How do you have a relationship if you don't have the empathy that you need, the self-discipline, the awareness, if you're not able to motivate, and if you're not managing a relationship? So that encompasses emotional intelligence. So I would say focus, even though people look at emotional intelligence as, oh, it's a soft skill. No, it's a critical skill. And I think we learned that a lot through the pandemic. And we've upped the game in emotional intelligence. So sticking in that bucket is important. We talked a little bit about the confidence. And I'm going to link in the communication aspect. You have to be a good communicator to influence. And with good communication comes confidence, because you need people to be confident in you. And you'll know when they're confident in you, because if you're paying attention and if you're self-aware, you'll be able to read the signs and the cues that they give you, from the sound of their voice to the words they use to the body language that displays when they're either recognizing that you're influencing them in a way and they're buying into it and they like it. I also think it's your ability to be authentic and also have ethical conduct. So if you are not bringing your genuine self to the table, who is going to trust in you? You need that transparency, which will kind of parlay into ethical conduct, truth, and honesty. All of that builds the relationship. The foundation has to be trust. Granted, there are salespeople who you don't know, and somehow they pull an emotional string, and the next thing you know, you're writing a check for a charity that you didn't know about. But with trust as that foundation, you will be influenenced more by someone, whether it's a friend, it's a family member, it's a colleague, a peer. And so those are some of the buckets. Do they resonate?
Yeah. I'm just nodding my head because I'm trying to identify my own, where I'm strong and what my deficiencies are in this particular area. And, where is it that the confidence part of it probably ebbs and flows, These are all things that kind of, I'd hope that ethics never ebbs and flows. And I would hope that, I'd hope that you're always authentic, but confidence is maybe it's is it a function of, in some ways, of empathy? Like when you feel that the other person isn't on board with what you're saying or what you're doing, and it that jars your confidence. Whereas if you don't have a high empathy, or you're not empathic, you're more likely to just be kind of, confident by nature. Or I don't know.
That's a tough one. That's really tough, because most people think that they're empathetic, and maybe they are, or maybe they're just being sympathetic, but empathy is on different levels. And I think you have to break down the levels of empathy to truly understand where you are with the person who you're trying to influence, and if you have the confidence. So the first level is that cognitive empathy.
Yeah.
And that's just your knowing that something is going on with them, and your understanding. You might change the way you come across, the sound of your voice, the words that you use. You might open up your body language, but you're not quite tuned in to a deeper level. Then when you get to emotional empathy, that level, you really are on the inside, and the person is sharing exactly what's going on. So maybe you do have a little more confidence in the understanding because they're sharing with you. All of this is based on a foundation of trust. And then the last level is compassionate, which compassionate empathy means I know so much about your situation, Dan, that I can actually help you with an action plan. And through this action plan, you're going to help yourself through a situation. And that is a level of confidence and understanding that could go hand in hand.
Is it a learnable kind of progress to go from these, like somebody who has like a natural level of cognitive empathy, let's say, is it possible to move up to this compassionate level? Is it learned, or is it something that's practiced but not innate? Does it vary?
I don't know if I have an easy answer for this. I feel it's a muscle that can be
Yeah.
developed. If you work at it, if you're on the cognitive level, then I don't know why you wouldn't be able to further that relationship and cultivate and
Mhm.
take the time to truly walk a day in that person's shoes.
I'm asking partly because it's fascinating to me, but also because I did an assessment a while back. And the assessment was like one of these personality assessments and performance assessments that talks about, your various character, your tendencies and your characteristics on a, I forget how many point scale. But one of them was empathy. And the assessment tells you what your level of empathy is like in relation to
Mhm.
the rest of what you have. And there was an opposite, kind of negative characteristic that pulled on empathy. And maybe it's logic. It's empathy on one side, logic on the others, which isn't negative. It's just kind of different things.
Different.
And the assessment tells you how you behave at work, how you behave at home, and what your core is. So you got three different personalities that are sort of battling inside of you. My work empathy score was off the charts, but at home, apparently, I have zero empathy. Zero.
Surprise.
and my core wasn't even that high either. And it was like, and I wasn't the only one. Like there was a few other folks in our group who did this, and we were like, oh, so we're the fake empaths, we're the lying empaths. Like we're putting on a show. And I never felt it that way, honestly. But I've always, I've never really given it much thought about how I could like raise that bar. At home, of course, I can raise the bar by being mindful, present, and listening very, very carefully to my wife. That would be the way.
Well, that's you just pegged it. It's you. If you have empathy in one area of your life, you can have it in another. But if you think about the way that the work life, I don't know if you call it balance blend, sometimes we're just off. By the time you're home, or if home is work, you might not be turning it off. So your wife doesn't get that empathy that you work so hard at your job to make sure it's present. That's all it is.
There must be like a reservoir that gets depleted. Kind of like the Julia Cameron, like artist's way, like your creativity, is like a reservoir, and you got to occasionally replenish, refill the well, or replenish the reservoir, or whatever metaphor she uses. Maybe it's the same thing with empathy. I don't know. Anyway, I just, it plays so deeply into influence these days. I had a great guest recently named Chip Massey and his partner Adele Gambardello. And Chip is an ex-FBI, hostage negotiator and interrogator. Like it's just, and the sweetest guy. He was a preacher, I think, originally. Like, and he comes out when you see him. He could be the local pastor at the church, like that kind of guy.
Yes.
You'd never know that he was, a serious badass. Probably still is. But since leaving the FBI and everything, he's developed a framework for forensic listening, right? And just listen. Like it is listening, like being methodical and I guess mindful and extremely careful about the way that you listen, with the intent of not answering things right away, of really truly absorbing what somebody says and then giving yourself time to analyze. It's not like an on the fly thing. It's something that is a practice that evolves. And it seems to me that kind of deep listening is probably a key to influence, whether you call it forensic listening or something else.
I agree.
But
right, because
how does that? Yeah.
If we think we listen too. That's the other thing. We think we're empathetic. We think we're actively listening. There's a lot that slips through. So this, I'm going to look. Chip, is that what you said?
Chip Massey.
Chip Massey. I'm going to look him up.
Yeah,
because his model sounds interesting and useful.
I'll do better than that. I will connect you with him.
Oh, that would be
He's my guest.
Awesome.
So
thank you.
take note, listeners. If I fail to do that, you can hold me accountable. Yeah.
I think that you certainly can't even get to a place of empathy if you don't have the deep listening. Listening is always the number one. The listening and the observing. Because the more that we can take in, the more we can open up our senses and experience somebody else's map of the world and the pictures that they have in their heads, well, that informs us in the way that we're going to come across and to communicate. And that definitely plays a part in influence.
Yeah. It's that patience and pause, pause being like one of the best words I've ever learned and hardly ever practice, unfortunately. But that patience to listen, that can be practiced. They always say that it's the quiet ones you need to watch out for, in the room. And I think it's very true. It's the unassuming people who are listening, taking things very carefully, taking it all in, and they come back with a not only well thought response, but a genuine understanding of what's going on.
Yes.
With my institutional ADHD and all that, I just I feel like I see the end before they're even at the middle sometimes, and I jump, right. And it's another thing I need to be aware of. But I think a lot of people are like that, and especially in our profession, communicators. We tend to be idea people, visionaries, people like this who just want to fix and help and help and help and help, and we can't get out of our own way sometimes. So a good framework for influence would really, really be helpful. Yeah. Now you're doing a lot of work in training people to be more influential and training.
Yes.
So what is your program, and how are you helping people? And what are some of the learnings that you've had from doing that program?
So my program it's called the Influential Communicator, and it is based on 4 C's. It's to learn to become calm, clear, concise, and confident, so people can be confident in you. The goal of the program as you move through it is to get yourself aligned, because so much of the time we think we're communicating well, but what ends up is we don't have influence, and why not? So I teach how to enhance your vocal cues, to use your voice, the power of your voice, to think about the words you're using. Are they crisp? Are they concise? Are you getting the most important points across? How are you painting vivid pictures? And then to get to a point where you can deliver vocally and verbally, and your body language flows, because that's where there's a break. You're not going to be influential if your voice sounds good and the words you're using, you've scripted them, but your body language is off. And that's what people are looking and observing. And then once you learn about yourself and how to get into your own alignment and flow, you can then understand how to read the signals and the cues in the room. I work with a lot of financial services, asset managers, investment bankers. And that is the key, is to be able to read the signals in the cues. And you said early on, you asked, well, how do you know?
Yeah.
Because when you get good at understanding even what happens to yourself, your voice, how you speak, how you use your body language, you can then look at somebody else to understand. And I am certified in body language, and I study body language. And that's where did my confidence come through? It's in their reaction, how they sound, what they say, and the way their body moves.
It's interesting because I talk a lot about, AI and the future of technology and the trends that are hitting our profession. It's the trending communicator after all. And there are these fundamental building blocks of what makes us good communicators that often get overlooked, but that are also, I think, our understanding of these things is evolving, over time. And, understanding where and how you need to be improving your interpersonal skill, especially, to wield influence in this case, is one of those core fundamentals, but it's also, I think it's evolved a lot over time. And the pressures of everything that's going on around us, I don't know if it's denigrating these skills or if it is giving us opportunities to enhance these skills. Something I just curious about, because let me just kind of try to illustrate a little bit if I can, where, when people were years and years ago, I suppose, well before either of us were on this earth, the calculator was invented, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the theory, the thinking was, if you give calculators to people, they're going to forget how to use numbers, right? People say the same things about AI sometimes. If you give AI to people, they're going to forget how to write, right? I wonder if there's any, kind of concomitant effect that happens to our influence skills, to being calm, clear, concise, and confident, to those abilities to read people, that are affected in some way, good or bad, by the advent of so much technology and so much digital interaction. It's a philosophical question, Deirdre. I'm just wondering.
I think you're on.
What do you
something.
think? Yeah.
There's no doubt in my mind that technology, as helpful as it is, can be a huge distraction, because the screen time, we're constantly getting stimulated by what we see. It's a dopamine hit when you're out there on social media. Mm-hmm. That all detracts from your ability to be calm, clear, concise, and confident. So it's a balancing act. I still see it. I'll be the glass half full rather than the glass half empty. I say to any executive and business professional, be up for the challenge. This is the greatest challenge of your life, that you can use technology for the efficiencies to help advance our learning and what we're doing to enhance. But it should not take away from the skills and who you are as a professional. And that's where, if you're in communications, if you want to move the needle, you want to be an influencer, you need your calm. That's number one.
Number one.
Your brain has to be calm in order for you to be verbally fluent. If your brain is spinning because of all the technology and the excitement and the dopamine hits, you can't get the words out.
How true is that? I mean, that's me half the time. My brain is spinning a lot. My first episode in the Trending Communicator in this iteration of my show was Matt Abraham's, and he wrote a book called Think Faster, Talk Smarter. He's the host of that podcast, I think of the same name at Stanford, and some of the things that he said were very led to that same point, that calmness, that need to overcome your anxiety or tamp down your excitement, whatever it may be, to get started. And I'm kind of veering a little bit off from this idea of technology or things that are potentially denigrating our capability to be human and leadership, human and leader, and human leaders and influencers. Boy, that was a weird way to string the words together. But when it comes back down to it, the common thread here is, for the future, for now, for hopefully forever, we as humans who are leading the profession and communicating, can't lose sight of this core set of human skills. So it's more important than ever, I think, to build these skills, to work on being a better listener and figuring out some way to calm yourself and get a clear head. Now more than ever, because the noise is just going to get louder and louder.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. So we need to talk to Deirdre a lot more about this.
Thank you.
What do you think about, I know we were talking a little bit about playing with AI and the idea, it's a black box. We still don't know everything that it can do, right? And sooner or later, we're going to have agents where you can just kind of, say, go make me a reservation. You know what's funny? I said, make me a reservation. And just the other day, I was criticizing somebody, like just internally criticizing people for always using food as the first kind of example when people talk about a new technology. I don't know if you ever noticed that. Somebody introduces a new robot, it'll deliver a pizza for you, or
our minds are in our stomachs.
Yeah, AI. It's a great recipe book, right? I mean, and it's funny. So anyway, I was a little hypocritical there for a second, but the point is that you've got this great and very unknown thing, right? And you have these agents that are coming there very soon that you can give it orders to do things. You're not going to be able to tell an AI agent, to go and influence a CEO for you. Right? You're not going to be able to say, "Hey, look, I've got a meeting in 24 hours. I need to prepare all the information." It'll get you the information, but can you go talk to the CEO for me and start to put in the good word?
Right,
or can you build a relationship with me? Can you negotiate for me? Can you build trust for me? Will not happen, cannot happen. So we're on safe ground there, but also, it's a ground that we need to be really very protective of and careful of, I think. And
because anything could
cultivate.
happen. We could have super robots in the future,
for sure,
who can certainly do everything. But I think for now, what I'm hearing you say is that we want that seat at the table. That's number one. And how can we use AI to enhance this for us? So a lot of what we do that's tedious, that takes our time and pulls us away from the strategy, because I spent many years in communications where it's, why are PR people so tactical? Why aren't they doing the strategy?
Oh, well, that's a great point.
Because there's a lot of there's a lot of tactics and research and tedious things. However, which builds, it does become a part of the strategy, and in some cases with the research. But I think AI gets us to a place of enhanced efficiency. It gives us the speed that we need and the personalization that we can get. It gives us real-time insights that, yes, you do have to check and double check and corroborate sources so that you can bring that to the table and be fully armed, and to have more information that will help you to negotiate and to give you a business case. So I think the glass is half full. In a sense, we've got some power, and we're not going to leave everything to AI. Just as you said, you don't want somebody building trust with the CEO for you. You're going to do that. So using it to our benefit.
Yeah. And you mentioned, all of the reasons why it's easy to adopt AI from a business standpoint. We get those productivity benefits. We get this, we can take care of enhanced efficiency and personalization. And those are, for an open-minded organization, or for people who kind of understand what's going on a little bit, it's very clear when you go to somebody and say, I've been able to free up 15, 20, 40% of my time. The question is, what do you do with that? Like, what do you do with that time that you freed up? Now my argument, of course, is that we can continue to use the tools that we have available to us in so many more kind of even yet unknown, but so many more ways to enhance our strategic capabilities, right? Get above the tactics. But once people kind of get those like little tactical things, and they're not little, but some of that drudgery or some of the tedious work done, they take a breath, and then, okay, what do I do with myself?
Learn.
And maybe like learning. Well, learning is absolutely right.
Yes, be curious. Innovate.
Be curious.
Take the time to enhance areas that you have great, deep interest and purpose and passion. So even if it's, do I have time on the job to do things, then I would learn for my company and bring new things to the table. Could be that. But if I'm freeing up time that I have outside of work, then where's my passion? And what can I do there that enhances me? and gives me energy.
Yeah, and I'm starting to experience that a little bit more. My other problem is that when I have more time, I just think of more projects and interesting things that I want to pursue. So I have to prioritization is becoming a very critical skill for me. But I was also thinking that we're so kind of hardwired or trained in many ways in work to just keep doing things, do, right? You got to do something. You got to produce something. You got to present. Right? So when you free up some time, an unfortunate number of people, I think that learning is not work. So, let's put that aside for a second. Wouldn't it make sense to sort of look at that extra time you gain, whether it's a half hour or 2 hours a week or maybe more, as your opportunity to build your influence skills, among other things?
Right.
And you said learn. Of course, they could take your course, and that's fantastic. And I highly recommend everybody do that. The website will be in the show notes. However, there's so much people can do. And, are they using their time properly? We keep saying, move up the value chain. What does that look like? What does that mean? I think it means getting those human skills right.
Yeah, I agree. I think we need more work on our human skills, because when we build our human skills, we have better relationships. Better relationships are built on trust and your own confidence gets you to the influence. It's like a little chain reaction.
It's crazy, and we've been talking about how I think there's a lot of space going to be opened up for us, and we can grow into that space in different ways. And yet, or not yet, because it's not a contrary thing, but at the same time, there's some incredible developments happening in even more novel innovations that help us to be more human in some ways. And here, of course, I'm giving you a nice segue into what you're doing with AI now, Deirdre, with and you alluded to it earlier, your facial recognition tool. And that's all the information I have is it's a facial recognition tool. So can you tell us a little more about that?
Sure.
Because I think the implications certainly are quite broad, and the application can be quite broad. And the ethical use thereof is going to be extremely critical. But yeah.
Yes, of course. Mm-hmm. I wanted to have a tool as a part of my program that shows professionals that sometimes what you say and how you come across or you think you're being perceived isn't exactly accurate. And this tool picks up on, of course, expressions, but also micro expressions. Our face flashes these quick signals, we'll call them, within 1/10 to 1/25 of a second. And if you can imagine it, it's happening all of the time. And we've developed it in such a way that you can now go on, you can be a beta tester. It's free. Go to fiq.ai. And once you log in as a beta tester, you'll notice that the AI camera ball starts to track you in 4 different quadrants. The quadrants are a high control quadrant, a low control quadrant, an obstructive quadrant, and a conductive quadrant. And just as they're named, you can kind of tell you want to be in high control. Conductive is a good one. Obstructive is annoyed and angry. That's not a good one. And the low control is some of those lower feeling emotions. Maybe you're down, melancholy, could even be depressed. Mm-hmm. So the ball just keeps tracking you. That's number one. It shows you when you are in the universal buckets of emotions. You're happy, sad, fear, disgust, neutral. It tracks you that way. It also gets into emotional arousal, how long something sticks on your face, whether it's and where you are in a quadrant, as well as the intensity of the emotion, because each quadrant can be a very low intensity or a high intensity. There's a big difference between being slightly suspicious and completely not trusting and having that negative intense emotion. So it's a way to go on and record yourself as you speak. You're giving a presentation. You go on, you use the tool, you record, you download the video, it's captured you, you watch the playback, which, I mean, to this day, I still don't understand. Well, I do understand it's cringy to watch yourself.
Yes, exactly.
It's just cringy. And now to have on top of it this intelligence tool letting you know that when you were saying something you thought was positive and you were influencing, it puts you in a different quadrant with an emotion that you had no idea, and it shows you what your face did. And that's valuable when you're selling, when you're pitching, when you're negotiating, when you want to move any kind of needle and have influence.
And these are things you can practice.
Of course.
And learn, right? I mean, that's, I have been, I've had some fun leading workshops and doing some presentations here and there and doing some, a little bit of public speaking, panel discussions and, introducing people and whatnot. And recently I had the pleasure of introducing, last year, I had the pleasure of introducing Mark Schaefer at a big conference. And, Mark's my friend, and we had a great time, and certainly he did a killer presentation. He's a great speaker. I didn't prepare my introduction until just a few minutes before we went on, and I'm just doing the little introduction, and I'm going to stand by the podium, and this is my audience anyway. They all know me. It's a low pressure thing. Now, my introduction was nice. It was perfectly fine, but afterwards, I talked to Mark, who's always straight up and brutally honest with me. He said, I get the sense sometimes that you're winging it, Dan. It's like very, okay, hold up a mirror. I mean, that's exactly right. And this idea of just kind of, practicing and rehearsing, especially
understanding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It gives me a little bit of the heebie-jeebies because I'm like, that means I have work to do. It's like you understand there's a weakness in your whole system, and you just hesitate to address that weakness because you got other things to do. And if it's not festering and causing problems, we'll just let it lie. But really, we should be addressing those weaknesses.
Mm-hmm. Especially because you said that influence will become more important as technology grows. Now, here's something to think about. When you use an AI tool, whether it's our FIQ or it's another tool, there's only a certain percent of accuracy. And you don't want to get tripped up there. It's knowing that when you're on the tool that you have to check and double check, because it's 65, 70% accurate. AI on our tool sometimes doesn't understand that when you use your head to punctuate, sometimes we use our brow to illustrate, and our eyebrows go up for an important point, like I'm doing now. AI might say, oh, Deirdre's surprised. And if you're surprised, you're over in the obstructive quadrant, as opposed to positive. I'm really excited about this point that I want to share. So knowing yourself, you have to be able to say, oh, I get that's a little off there. It'll get better. It will. Remember with social media and sentiment, there was a time that sentiment tracking was way low, 50%, 60%. And then all of a sudden it bumped up 88, 90, 95%. That's what's going to happen here too.
Yeah, it's better and better all the time.
Yes.
And facial recognition itself is just a leading edge technology. I mean, there was a moment, and it seemed to happen like overnight, where if you were a global entry person coming back to the US from abroad, you had to put your passport into the little scanner, but now you just kind of glance into the camera and done, right?
Done.
Clear works the same way. So it's a technology that is now embedded in our world.
Right.
So why not use it to our advantage, right? Why not kind of have it used? Now, there's some creepiness there, of course, as there is with a lot of these AI things. But it seems to me that's something that I definitely want to try, because I'm fidgety, Yeah, I definitely want to do it.
We're trying to put the analytics behind it. That's what we're working on now. An analytics package so that you understand you were on the tool for 10 minutes, you gave your presentation, how much time was spent in each quadrant, what were the dominant emotions, just so you have a better understanding when you walk away. And that's coming soon.
Oh, that would be super useful. It's like having your own coach, your own performance coach.
Exactly.
You can use that if you're not already. There's so much going on here. Look, the whole concept of influence certainly is overwhelming to me in some ways. And every time that I've in a role in the past where I haven't gotten to where I needed to go, I do tend to, blame myself. And oftentimes it is my fault, right? It's, okay, or I can find the root cause in my own behavior or my own choices, more like my own choices, I think. And influence, probably the failure to wield influence, or wielding the wrong kind of influence, or pointing my energies toward kind of places where, that weren't the highest priorities. 9 times out of 10, that's a cause of some sort of gap of understanding or urgency, or what I called it, an urgency gap recently, where my priorities are different from the organization's, and there's no compromise there. There's no attempt to understand how to move my priorities closer to theirs and theirs closer, because they're not going to move them to mine.
Right.
And that's gotten me in hot water. It's all in retrospect, right?
Sure.
And reflectively speaking, and valuable learning. But if you had that kind of understanding ahead of time, really could be calm, be mindful of your own influence skills, I think that would be extremely powerful, especially on your leadership journey. It's I can't stress enough, everybody, go find Deirdre.
Thank you.
So the last thing I'm going to ask you, Deirdre, really is just looking into the future, what's coming down the pike, and whether it's through the science of influence. I'm sure you have some neuroscience involved there as well, or what's going on with that as it applies to communications and marketing. What do you see ahead of us, or even now, that's kind of moving forward, that either gives you pause or gives you great joy? I'm going to leave that open to you to decide, because you're a glass half full person. I want to make sure that you have the chance to be joyful and glorious as you always are.
Well, the half full person wants to congratulate all the leaders who are taking emotional intelligence and empathy seriously, seeing it as critical skills, must-have skills. So I think we're going to need a lot more in that area, and to always be feeling.
Always be feeling.
Always be feeling. We can't take that for granted. Not that we're ever truly going to know how somebody feels. However, based on the forensic listening and the ability to study and understand kind of the pictures in someone's head, we have a great opportunity. I think we're going to see a lot more in the influence arena. We're definitely going to see a lot more in the AI arena. And that's where I hope that people realize in our industry, you have a seat at the table. Don't stop going for it. Have the confidence to want to be there, and the reason to be there. And that does come from, I do believe, enhancing your skills, some of the buckets that we talked about.
Yeah.
We are our own resistance, Dan. I truly believe that we have opportunities, but we get in the way of ourselves.
It's funny. The book that's on my desk right now is this one, The War of Art.
That a long time ago. Great book.
Yeah. And I have it like dog-eared. I check it out from time to time, but it's, you talk about the resistance. It just immediately popped in my head. That's your enemy. Your enemy is the resistance that's inside of you, and that's keeping you from doing things. It takes on a lot of names, but I want to take away from this conversation, first of all, that I continue to be enamored with Deirdre Breakenridge, but second of all, that I want to work on my, methodically work on this influence, because it's a gap in my whole, it's a missing part of my toolkit, or whatever you want to call it. And, I've I'm so vested in helping our communications and marketing colleagues and peers to deal with the future, to cope with the future, to understand technology, to accelerate AI in their organizations, because I do believe it is a key that's going to unlock a lot of, incredible work for us and a safe future for us. And when I say safe, I mean, I want everybody to have a job, and I want everybody to be employed, and I want everybody to be, doing things that they're happy with and having a great time. And I think there's more now with AI that you can do. All that said, I'll be able to do it better if I can be a better influencer. Mm-hmm. And that is just gold from my perspective. So, Deirdre, I want to thank you. I want to let everybody know that, Deirdre is extremely findable. Go to LinkedIn, look for Deirdre Breakenridge. Her name will be spelled properly in the episode graphic and in the notes. Check out DeirdreBreakenridge.com for her resources, to find out what she's up to learn about her training programs. Her company, pureperformancecom.com as well is a good place to go to just see some of the services, some of the things that she's done in her career. FIQ.ai for the beta test of the facial recognition, emotion detector thingy majig.
Yes. Thank you, Dan.
I think it's amazing. Any place else, Deirdre, where you spend your time, where people can find you?
No, I think you hit it. I want everybody to know I'm a LinkedIn Learning instructor, so I do have courses on LinkedIn Learning. I hope you check them out. And this has just been such a great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. And definitely everybody go look up Deirdre if you don't know her already. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for taking the time to listen in on today's conversation. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to subscribe through the podcast player of your choice, share with your friends and colleagues, and leave me a review. 5 stars would be preferred, but it's up to you. Do you have ideas for future guests, or you want to be on the show? Let me know at dan@trendingcommunicator.com. Thanks again for listening to The Trending Communicator.